My parents sued me to take away my $3 million lakefront property, claiming it rightfully belonged to my unemployed sister. I stood in court, watched my father's shaky voice crack at just the right moments, watched my mother press a tissue against perfectly dry eyes, and before I could stop myself I laughed. The sound escaped so suddenly that even my attorney turned toward me. I covered my mouth, but it was too late. The judge frowned. My sister looked horrified. My parents stared at me as if I had proven every terrible thing they had spent months saying about me. "I'm sorry," I managed to say between breaths. "It's just, they're doing the crying part already?" The courtroom fell silent. I hadn't slept the night before. Too many memories. Too many years I'd spent trying to convince myself that if I worked harder, earned more, stayed kinder, maybe one day they'd love me the way they loved my younger sister, Melissa. Standing there, I realized something painful and strangely freeing. They weren't crying because they had lost a daughter. They were crying because they thought they were about to lose a house they had never owned. Melissa lowered her head dramatically. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. That sentence. I'd heard it my entire life. Growing up outside Minneapolis, our suburban neighborhood looked perfect from the street. White fences, summer barbecues, Christmas lights in December. Inside the house, everything revolved around Melissa. If she failed a class, my parents blamed her teachers. If I earned straight A's, they asked why I didn't get extra credit. When I got my first part-time job at Target during high school, my mother smiled proudly, not at me but at Melissa. "See," she told her. "Now your sister can buy you the new phone you wanted." Actually did. Because saying no always came with consequences. "You know Melissa's struggles. You're stronger. Family helps family." Those words followed me into adulthood like shadows. After college, I worked 2 jobs. One in real estate administration during the day and freelance bookkeeping at night. Most evenings ended with cold drive-through coffee and spreadsheets until midnight. My parents never asked how exhausted I felt. Instead, they asked whether Melissa needed another loan. She bounced between jobs, quit whenever a manager criticized her, and somehow every failure became someone else's fault. Then she moved back in with my parents at 33. "No one understands her anxiety," my mother explained. I understood anxiety. Mine came every time my phone rang with my father's number. 3 years ago, everything changed. A retired couple wanted to sell their lakefront property quickly after relocating to Arizona. Most buyers hesitated because the house needed renovations. I saw possibilities instead of problems. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every extra client, every sacrifice had built the savings I needed for the down payment. The day I signed those papers, I sat alone inside the empty living room. There was peeling paint, old carpet, windows that barely opened. But the lake shimmered beyond the backyard, peaceful, fullness. For the first time in my life, something belonged only to me. I cried then. Happy tears. Real ones. I spent weekends painting walls myself. I learned plumbing from online videos. I hauled supplies from Walmart until my little SUV looked like a hardware store on wheels. Every improvement increased the property's value. Then the market exploded. Within 3 years, the house was appraised at just over $3 million. I made one mistake. I invited my family to see it. Melissa wandered through every room like she already owned it. "I've always wanted a lake house," she sighed. My mother squeezed her shoulder. "You deserve something beautiful after everything you've been through." I nearly laughed then too. Everything she'd been through? She had never lost a job because of layoffs. Never worked 80-hour weeks. Never worried about paying bills. She had simply refused to keep responsibilities for long. A week later my father called. "We've been talking." Whenever he said we, it meant everyone except me had already decided. "You should transfer the house to Melissa." Thought he was joking. "I'm serious." "No. She's family. So am I. You don't need something that big." I bought it. You were lucky. Lucky. Not disciplined. Not determined. Lucky. When I refused again, my parents stopped speaking to me. Peace settled over my life for almost 4 months. Then the lawsuit arrived. They claimed I had used family money to purchase the property, that my grandparents had always intended the lake house to become Melissa's inheritance, that I had manipulated elderly relatives before their deaths. None of it made sense. None of it was true. Still, Lies printed on legal paper look frighteningly official. I hired an attorney immediately. While preparing our defense, we collected every bank statement, every tax return, every mortgage payment, every renovation receipt. Years of documentation filled several thick binders. Then my lawyer found something unexpected. The supposed handwritten letter from my late grandmother promising the property to Melissa had already been examined by a forensic document specialist hired during discovery. The signature wasn't copied. It wasn't traced. It had been created using artificial intelligence from scanned birthday cards Melissa had uploaded months earlier while making a family photo album. The metadata remained embedded in the file. Melissa hadn't just lied. She had manufactured evidence. Suddenly the lawsuit transformed from desperate to dangerous. Back in the courtroom, my father's performance continued. "My oldest daughter abandoned her family," he said dramatically. "She became selfish after making money." I stared at him. Abandoned? I'd paid their utility bills twice. Covered their roof repairs. Bought groceries during difficult months. I even paid for Melissa's car after she'd totaled hers. My mother dabbed at invisible tears. "We only want fairness." My attorney stood. "Your Honor, permission to display Exhibit 42. The large courtroom monitor flickered on. A timeline appeared. Bank records. Mortgage transfers. Property tax payments. Renovation invoices. Every dollar traced directly from my accounts. Then came the forensic report. The AI-generated signature analysis. Software logs. Upload history. Even the original scanned birthday card Melissa had used. The courtroom became so quiet I could hear someone shifting papers near the back row. Melissa's attorney slowly removed his glasses. My sister looked toward my parents, searching for rescue. Neither moved. The judge studied the report for several long moments. Finally, he looked directly at Melissa. "Did you create this document?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. My father suddenly wasn't crying anymore. My mother wasn't reaching for tissues. Their performance had ended. The judge dismissed every claim against me. Then he referred the forged evidence to prosecutors for possible criminal investigation. I expected triumph. I felt tired. Just unbelievably tired. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited because someone had tipped off local media about the unusual lawsuit involving a multimillion-dollar property. My parents hurried away without speaking. Melissa climbed into another car. Not one of them looked back. My attorney asked if I wanted to pursue repayment for legal fees. "I do," I answered quietly. "Are you sure?" I nodded. For the first time in my life. Months later, the civil judgment required them to reimburse most of my legal expenses. Melissa accepted a plea agreement that spared jail but left her with probation, community service, and a permanent lesson about forged evidence. My parents sold their home to cover debts they had created chasing mine. I never celebrated. Instead, I drove back to my lake house just before sunset. I carried a cup of coffee onto the dock and watched the water ripple beneath the fading orange sky. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt earned. Sometimes I still catch myself expecting my phone to ring with another demand, another guilt-filled speech, another reminder that family comes first. Rarely does anymore. I planted maple trees along the shoreline that autumn. I filled the guest room with books instead of obligations. Friends visit now. People who bring laughter instead of expectations. People who thank me before leaving. Standing on that dock, listening to waves brush gently against the wood, I finally understood why I laughed in court that morning. It wasn't because the situation was funny. It was because the illusion had finally collapsed. Their fake tears had lasted only a few minutes. The life I built with my own hands, that would last far longer. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, emotional stories like this. Your support truly means everything and helps us keep sharing meaningful content. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.